For many years, humanity had been overlooked by the rest of the galaxy. To the advanced alien races, humans were nothing more than a fledgling species, barely surviving on their small blue planet. But those who doubted humanity had underestimated them. Over the centuries, humans had fought hard to survive, and against all odds, they had become a force to be reckoned with. It all began when they discovered the stars. With their ability to adapt, learn, and innovate, humans quickly built ships capable of traveling across the vast distances of space. At first, they were only exploring, sending small ships to nearby planets. But as time passed, they grew bolder. They colonized new worlds, each one an achievement, each one a testament to their determination. Soon, humans began to build fleets, large groups of ships designed to protect their people and their interests. Ethan was one of the first commanders to lead humanity's fleet into the stars. He had been a soldier for most of his life, but now he was a commander, responsible for the safety of thousands. Under his leadership, humanity's fleet grew stronger, and their reputation spread far and wide. They were known for their fierce defense of their colonies and their relentless drive to explore and expand. The other races in the galaxy had to take notice. But it wasn't just their military strength that made humanity stand out. It was their spirit. The humans refused to be intimidated by the powerful alien civilizations they encountered. Where others would have backed down, humanity charged forward. Their ability to work together, their unity in the face of adversity, made them unique in the eyes of other races. They were not just a group of individuals. They were a collective force, united by a common purpose. Lena, a scientist and engineer, was at the heart of this revolution. She had helped design some of the most advanced technologies that powered humanity's fleet. Ships that once could only dream of traveling between star systems now could do so with ease, thanks to her innovations. The energy shields that protected their ships were nearly impenetrable, and the weapons they carried were capable of devastating entire fleets. But Lena knew that technology alone wouldn't be enough. She believed that humanity's true strength lay in their willingness to never give up, to push through even when things seemed impossible. David, a young soldier, had always looked up to the legends of humanity. He had grown up hearing stories of the great victories won by humanity's heroes. Now he was living those stories himself. He had joined the military to fight for the same cause that had made humanity legendary. Every day, he trained hard, hoping to be as brave and clever as the commanders he admired. He had seen the strength of humanity's will, and he wanted to be a part of it. The humans were not without their struggles, of course. As their power grew, so did the challenges they faced. Some alien civilizations, fearful of the humans' rapid rise, began to view them as a threat. There were always those who wanted to control or destroy what they didn't understand. But humanity had always found a way to rise above it. The most difficult part was always finding peace with those who had different values. While many species fought each other, humanity had always believed that cooperation was the key to long-lasting success. They tried their best to avoid conflict, but when the time came, they were always ready to fight. In the quiet of their colonies, though, there was a sense of peace. People lived simple lives, working. Humanity's rise to power had not been quick or easy, but it was unstoppable. Each victory, no matter how small, built their reputation across the galaxy. The people of Earth and its colonies, once divided by borders and differences, had become united under one cause: survival and progress. They had become something more than just a race of people. They were legends, living proof of what could be achieved with determination and unity. Ethan's fleet had become a symbol of humanity's strength. Ships like the Aegis, the largest and most advanced vessel in the fleet, stood at the front lines of humanity's defense. As the commander, Ethan had learned that it wasn't just about having the best technology. It was about understanding people, his crew, his soldiers, and the citizens they protected. He'd watched young soldiers like David grow from novices into skilled warriors, and it filled him with pride. But more than anything, it was the unspoken bond of humanity that amazed him the most. Every person, from the highest officer to the lowest engineer, had a role to play in the great story of humanity's success. Maya, a brilliant strategist, was another key part of humanity's rise. She had helped orchestrate many of the fleet's most important missions. Her ability to think ahead, predict enemy moves, and craft strategies that balanced both offense and defense had earned her respect from all corners of the galaxy. Even the most experienced alien leaders had learned to tread carefully around her plans. Maya wasn't just a brilliant mind. She was a force in her own right, and her contributions were felt in every victory. But it wasn't just military strength or strategic genius that made humanity a legend. Lena's work in the field of science and technology had been nothing short of groundbreaking. The weapons the humans used were unlike anything the other civilizations had ever seen. Their energy shields could deflect the strongest blasts, and their energy weapons were capable of cutting through the toughest armor. But Lena wasn't content to stop there. Every day, she pushed the limits of what humanity could achieve. She worked on new technologies to make the ships faster, stronger, and more efficient, always with the goal of keeping humanity ahead of their rivals. David, now a young officer, felt the weight of his responsibility growing heavier with each passing day. He had fought in battles and seen the horrors of war, but he had also seen the best of humanity: the courage, the heart, and the resilience. He believed in the legends. He believed in the cause. And he knew that, despite the challenges they faced, humanity was destined for greatness. Yet, as the legends of humanity spread, not everyone saw them as heroes. Some of the galaxy's older civilizations, who had ruled the stars for centuries, began to grow wary. There was a quiet fear among them, a fear that humanity's rapid growth could one day challenge their own power. They watched from the shadows, knowing that one day they might have to confront this rising force. On a remote planet, an alien leader named Tarkus sat in a dark chamber, watching the latest reports from the edge of human space. He was the leader of the Krivians, one of the oldest and most powerful races in the galaxy. Tarkus had heard the stories of humanity's rise, and though he dismissed them at first, he could no longer ignore the truth. The humans were becoming too powerful to ignore. They were no longer a simple species fighting for survival. They were a growing empire with the potential to rival his own. "I have watched these humans long enough," Tarkus muttered, his voice low and filled with unease. "We cannot let them continue. They must be stopped." Tarkus began to assemble a coalition of other alien races, those who also feared humanity's rise. There was no open declaration of war, not yet, but behind the scenes, plans were being set in motion to deal with the human problem. Tarkus knew it would take time to build an alliance strong enough to confront humanity, but he also knew that time was not on his side. The humans were getting stronger with every passing day. Back on Earth, Ethan and his fleet remained unaware of the growing threat. They continued to explore the stars, bringing peace to those in need, and defending their colonies from any who would dare attack. Humanity's reputation had become legendary. They were no longer seen as a primitive species. They were a force to be reckoned with. Everywhere they went, their name was spoken with respect. But little did they know, their greatest challenge was yet to come. As Ethan stood on the bridge of the Aegis, watching the stars pass by, he couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. A chill ran down his spine. He had learned to trust his instincts over the years, and they were telling him that a storm was coming. But even he could not have predicted the scale of what was about to unfold. The peace humanity had worked so hard to create began to feel fragile. The vastness of space was filled with unknowns, and though humanity had proven themselves capable, there was always the looming uncertainty of what lay beyond the stars. In the quiet corners of the galaxy, beyond the reach of human exploration, something dangerous was beginning to take shape. Tarkus, the Krivian leader, had successfully formed an alliance with other powerful alien races who feared humanity's rapid rise. The Krivians, who had once ruled the stars with an iron grip, were not used to being challenged. They had seen humanity's fleets, their advanced technology, and the courage with which they fought. It was clear that humanity was not just a passing phase. They were becoming a new force, one that could potentially topple the long-standing powers of the galaxy. Tarkus couldn't let that happen. The first step in their plan was simple: sabotage. Instead of open warfare, Tarkus and his allies decided to undermine humanity from within. They began by sending covert agents to infiltrate human colonies, spreading misinformation and causing distrust. These agents worked quietly, stirring up fear and suspicion between human colonies. The peaceful alliances that humanity had spent so long building were now starting to crack. On one of the farthest human colonies, a planet named Viridian, David's unit was stationed. The people on Viridian were not warriors. They were farmers, engineers, and scientists. Their world had been a symbol of humanity's ability to thrive in every corner of the galaxy, but now David was noticing something strange. Tensions were rising among the people, and there was a growing sense of paranoia. What had once been a peaceful world was now filled with rumors, fear, and confusion. David couldn't help but wonder, was something happening beyond their knowledge? Meanwhile, Maya was busy analyzing data from the fleet's long-range scanners. There had been strange readings coming from the edge of known space, unusual energy spikes that couldn't be explained. At first, they thought it was a malfunction, but the patterns were too consistent to ignore. Maya was certain it wasn't a mistake. Something was out there. She couldn't shake the feeling that whatever it wasn't friendly. "Commander, you need to see this," Maya said to Ethan as she called him to her station. Ethan had learned to trust Maya's instincts, and when she was concerned, it was never without reason. She pointed to the screen where the readings were displayed. "This is the third time in the past month. It's coming from beyond the outer rim. It's not from any of the known species. I don't know what it is, but it's consistent and growing stronger." Ethan studied the data. He felt the weight of his position settling on his shoulders once more. His gut told him that something big was happening, but he had no concrete proof. The galaxy was full of dangers, but this was different. "The fleet needs to be ready," Ethan said, his voice steady but filled with determination. "Tell the crew to stay on high alert. We're not taking any chances." Tessa, a fleet intelligence officer, had also picked up on some unusual activity. She had intercepted encrypted transmissions between several alien factions, but they were too carefully hidden to decode easily. Her team was working around the clock to break the codes, but so far, they had found nothing definitive. Still, she couldn't shake the feeling that something was coming, something terrible. She had seen this type of careful coordination before, when enemies worked together in secret to face a common threat, and humanity was that threat. Back on Viridian, David's suspicions grew as the situation worsened. His unit was called in to investigate a series of strange attacks on the planet's infrastructure. The attacks were quick, precise, and seemingly random, but there was one thing they all had in common. They disrupted the flow of information. Communications were cut off, key data centers were sabotaged, and supply lines were attacked. It was clear that someone, or something, was working behind the scenes to cause chaos. As David and his team investigated further, they uncovered evidence that suggested the sabotage was not coming from within the human colonies, but from an outside source. Someone had planted agents in their midst, agents who knew exactly how to create chaos without leaving a trace. It was a well-planned operation, and it was beginning to show results. People were growing more suspicious of each other, and the peaceful unity humanity had fought so hard to build was starting to unravel. David knew that the situation on Viridian was just the beginning. Whatever was behind the attacks, it wasn't random. It was a calculated move, and if they didn't act fast, humanity could lose everything they had worked so hard for. Back aboard the fleet, Ethan and Maya were preparing for the worst. Whatever was out there, it was not just a random threat. The enemy was coming, and they were already inside humanity's borders. The question was, could humanity stop them before it was too late? The signs were subtle at first, little things that only the most careful observers would notice. But as the days passed, the evidence became harder to ignore. A cold feeling settled over the fleet, like a storm waiting to break. The strange energy readings Maya had discovered were becoming more frequent, and now they were accompanied by the same mysterious disruptions on human colonies. It was clear something was amiss, and it wasn't just a random event, it was coordinated. David's unit had finished securing the last of the damaged communication centers on Viridian. They had stopped the immediate threats, but the damage had been done. There was growing tension among the people, and whispers of betrayal spread like wildfire. People who had once trusted each other were now looking over their shoulders. David couldn't shake the feeling that this was just the beginning of something far worse. Ethan stood on the bridge of the Aegis, his eyes scanning the stars. The fleet was moving toward the outer rim, where the strange energy signals had originated. He wasn't sure what he was expecting to find, but he knew it wasn't good. His gut told him that they were walking into a trap. It was like a hunter luring its prey. Humanity had become the target, and now they were unknowingly marching straight into danger. Tessa had spent days trying to break the encrypted alien transmissions. Each time she thought she was close to cracking the code, it slipped away like smoke. Frustration was starting to build among her team, but Tessa remained determined. She knew the answers were out there, hidden within the lines of code, waiting to be found. But as she continued her work, the sense of urgency only grew. They needed to know who was behind the attacks, and fast. "Commander, we found something," Tessa said over the comms as Ethan approached her station. Her voice was tense, but there was a spark of hope in it. "I've managed to decrypt part of the transmission. It's not just one alien faction. It's a coalition. Multiple races working together, and they're planning something big. They're watching us." Ethan's heart sank. He had feared as much. They had underestimated the threat. It wasn't just a rogue group causing trouble. It was a coordinated assault, planned by multiple alien civilizations who saw humanity as a growing danger. The galaxy's old powers were coming together, united by one common goal: to take down humanity before it became too powerful. "We need to prepare for an attack," Ethan said, his voice sharp and commanding. "Move the fleet to alert status. No one leaves their posts. We may have a battle on our hands sooner than we thought." Back on Viridian, David's team had discovered something else. Amidst the sabotage and confusion, they had found evidence of a large fleet in the outer rim, an alien fleet much larger than anything humanity had ever seen. It wasn't moving toward any specific target. It was just waiting, hovering in the darkness of space, like a predator stalking its prey. David felt a chill run down his spine. He knew the signs of war when he saw them. And this was it. The enemy was out there, waiting for the right moment to strike. As the fleet moved closer to the outer rim, Ethan's thoughts raced. If they were truly walking into a trap, it was only a matter of time before the first shots were fired. He had been in battles before, but this felt different. The enemy wasn't just attacking. They were testing humanity, trying to break them apart before the real fight even began. The Aegis moved through space like a lion stalking its prey. The crew was on high alert, ready for anything. The tension in the air was thick, and no one spoke more than necessary. Even the smallest sound, the softest footstep, seemed to echo through the ship. Maya stood beside Ethan, her eyes focused on the data as it streamed across the screens in front of them. "We're approaching the coordinates," Maya said, her voice calm but filled with determination. "I don't like this, Ethan. There's something wrong here. I feel like we're being watched." "I know," Ethan replied. "But we can't turn back now. We have to find out what's really going on." David's team, now fully aware of the danger, had prepared for the worst. They had set up defensive positions around Viridian's capital city, waiting for the inevitable strike. The enemy's movements were unpredictable, but David was certain that this was only the beginning of something much larger. It wasn't just the sabotage that worried him. It was the fact that the attacks had been so well coordinated. Whoever was behind them knew exactly how to strike at humanity's weakest points. "We've trained for this," David said to his squad, his voice steady despite the growing fear. "We fight for our home. We fight for humanity." The feeling of danger was now undeniable. It wasn't just the fleet out in the dark corners of space. It was the quiet, unseen threat moving through the shadows, ready to strike when humanity least expected it. Ethan knew that the legend of humanity, the story of their strength and resilience, was about to be tested like never before. And the real fight was only just beginning. The tension in the fleet grew with each passing hour. The Aegis moved slowly through space, its sensors scanning every inch of the dark void around them. Maya's eyes never left the screens, and Ethan stood close, watching her closely. Something wasn't right. The readings were too clean, too perfect, as if the enemy knew exactly where they were. It was as if they had been waiting for the fleet to arrive. Ethan's hand tightened around the railing. "They're setting a trap. We've walked straight into it." Maya nodded grimly, her face pale. "They've been watching us for longer than we thought. This is no coincidence." The fleet's best ships were positioned around the Aegis, but none of the commanders felt at ease. Their weapons were ready, but their enemies weren't showing themselves. The feeling of being watched weighed heavily on everyone. No one spoke much anymore. The silence was deafening. Back on Viridian, David was feeling the same pressure. The sabotage had slowed, but there was still a nervous edge to everything. The people of Viridian were frightened, not knowing who to trust. David and his unit had been tasked with securing the planet, but the unknowns were piling up faster than they could handle. The alien fleet had not made a move yet, but David could feel the storm brewing. "What's our plan if they attack?" one of David's soldiers asked, his voice tight with worry. David looked out over the vast farmland, now silent and empty under the night sky. "We fight. We stand our ground. We hold them off long enough for the fleet to arrive. No matter what, we protect this planet." But David's thoughts were troubled. He couldn't shake the feeling that the enemy wasn't just coming for Viridian. They were coming for humanity as a whole. The entire galaxy had watched humanity grow, and now, as they rose to power, the older, established races seemed determined to crush them before they could truly take flight. The Aegis finally reached the coordinates, and Ethan stood with Maya and the rest of the command crew on the bridge. They were surrounded by nothing but empty space, the stars cold and distant. But then, the sensors began to pick up unusual activity. Ships, huge and dark, appeared on the edges of the fleet's scanners. Too many to count, too powerful to ignore. "There they are," Maya said quietly, a note of dread in her voice. "The enemy fleet, it's massive." Ethan's heart pounded. How long until they can strike? "They're already within range," Maya said, her fingers flying over the controls. "We've walked right into their trap. They've been waiting for us to get this close." "Open communications," Ethan ordered. The captain of the alien fleet had been silent until now, but it was time to confront them. The screen on the bridge flickered, and a tall, angular figure appeared. His eyes glowed an unnatural red, and his dark robes made him seem like something from a nightmare. He was Tarkus, the leader of the Krivians, and the man who had brought the galaxy's old powers together against humanity. "I see you found us." Tarkus's voice was cold, calculated. "You are brave, human, to come so close to your doom." Ethan's eyes narrowed. "We've come for peace. Your sabotage won't stop us." Tarkus let out a soft laugh, a sound that sent chills down Ethan's spine. "You misunderstand, human. It is not peace you deserve, but destruction. You have disturbed the balance of the galaxy with your rise. Now, you will pay the price." Ethan stood firm, despite the weight of the situation. "Humanity does not fear you. We stand together, and we will fight. We have fought for everything we've built, and we will continue to do so." Tarkus's smile faded. "Then you will die together." The communication cut off, and the bridge was silent for a moment, the crew holding their breath. "Prepare for battle," Ethan commanded. "We will not go down without a fight. The galaxy will learn that humanity is not to be underestimated." The fleet moved into battle formation, ready for whatever came next. But Ethan could feel the weight of the moment. This was more than a battle for survival. It was a battle for humanity's future. If they lost here, if the enemy succeeded, the legend of humanity would be nothing but a faded memory in the stars. Back on Viridian, David's unit was receiving the news. The fleet was engaged in battle, and there was no turning back now. The enemy wasn't just attacking one colony, they were attacking everything humanity had built. David knew they had to hold the line, no matter the cost. The storm was here, and it was about to break. The first shot was fired just as the communication screen cut out. The massive alien fleet, dark and ominous, unleashed its weapons. Blasts of energy lit up the void of space, streaking toward humanity's ships. The Aegis shuddered under the impact, but its shields held strong. The battle had begun. Ethan gripped the edge of the command table, his eyes locked on the view outside the ship. The enemy was fast, and their numbers were overwhelming. The human fleet was outgunned, outnumbered, but not outmatched. Ethan had led his crew through impossible situations before, and he wasn't about to let the Krivians take everything they had fought for. Shields at full power. Maya ordered from the weapons console, her voice steady despite the chaos. Brace for impact. The Aegis rocked again as another blast hit. Sparks flew from the control panels, and alarms blared throughout the ship. But the crew held their ground. Ethan could see the determination in their eyes. They were not going to lose. Return fire, Ethan shouted. All ships, engage the enemy. Focus on those cruisers. They're the biggest threat. The human fleet fired back, beams of energy shooting into the darkness. It wasn't enough to stop the Krivians, but it slowed them down, buying the humans precious time. On the planet Viridian, David's heart raced as he watched the stars above light up with explosions. The battle had reached space, and there was no turning back. The enemy fleet had split into smaller groups, attacking from all sides. David's soldiers were already in position, ready to defend the planet. But even as they prepared, he couldn't shake the feeling that they were fighting two wars, one in space and one on the ground. "We need to hold this city," David told his unit, his voice strong. "The fleet is busy out there, but we're the last line of defense here. If we fall, humanity falls." The soldiers nodded in agreement, tightening their grip on their weapons. David could see the fear in their eyes, but there was something else too: determination. The people of Viridian had built this colony from the ground up, and they weren't going to let it be destroyed now. As the battle in space raged on, Tarkus watched from the safety of his command ship, a cold smile on his face. The Krivians had prepared for this moment for years. They knew that humanity's fleet would not be easy to defeat, but they also knew one thing: the humans had not yet faced a true, unified enemy. Tarkus had brought together the most powerful races in the galaxy, and together they would crush the human threat. "They fight well," Tarkus said, watching the Aegis dodge and weave through enemy fire. "But it is not enough. Soon, they will be broken." His second-in-command, a tall, sharp-featured alien, stepped forward. "Shall we deploy the final weapon, my lord?" Tarkus hesitated for a moment. The final weapon was a last resort, a weapon capable of destroying entire fleets in a single strike. But he knew it was time. The humans were more resilient than he had expected, and it would take more than just their fleet to defeat them. "Do it," Tarkus ordered. The second-in-command nodded and turned to relay the command. Tarkus could feel the weight of his decision. This would end it all. He would either crush humanity or set the stage for their resurgence. He was ready to face whatever came next. Back on the Aegis, the crew fought with everything they had. Every shot that hit the ship reminded them of what they were fighting for: home, freedom, and the future. They could feel the weight of humanity's legacy in every battle. They couldn't afford to lose. Not now. Not ever. "Enemy flagship is on the move," Maya called out, her voice sharp. "It's heading directly for us." Ethan's eyes widened. The flagship was massive, heavier armed, and more heavily shielded than anything they had faced. It was a beast of a ship, and it was heading straight for them. "We need to take it down," Ethan barked. "Focus all fire on that flagship. Give everything we've got." The Aegis locked onto the enemy flagship and unleashed a barrage of energy blasts. But the flagship's shields absorbed the hits, and it continued its steady advance. "We can't break through its shields," Maya reported, frustration creeping into her voice. Ethan's mind raced. They couldn't stop it with conventional weapons. They needed a different strategy. The fleet was still fighting off smaller ships, but time was running out. The Aegis had to do something no one had ever attempted before, a dangerous maneuver, a desperate move. "Prepare to execute the bypass maneuver," Ethan said, his voice firm. "This is the only shot we've got." Maya turned to him in disbelief. "Are you sure? This could destroy the Aegis." "I'm sure. Do it, for humanity." The crew nodded, their faces set in grim determination. They knew the risks, but they also knew what was at stake. The Aegis lurched forward, faster than anyone expected, heading straight for the enemy flagship. It was a suicide mission, but it was their only hope. David watched from the surface of Viridian as the sky above him seemed to light up in a shower of energy. The ground trembled as explosions echoed through the atmosphere. He knew the fight was reaching its peak. Humanity's survival was on the line. And nothing, not even the darkest of odds, would stop them from fighting. The Aegis rocketed forward, charging directly toward the Krivian flagship. Ethan and the crew braced themselves, knowing the risks of the maneuver. If they succeeded, it could be a game-changer. If they failed, they would be lost in the void of space, and humanity's dream would end in silence. "Hold on," Ethan shouted over the deafening noise of the ship's engines. "All hands, brace for impact." The bridge shook as the ship swerved at the last second, narrowly avoiding the enemy's deadly blast. But the Aegis wasn't out of danger yet. The flagship's massive weapons were charging up for another strike, and the crew had no more time to waste. The ship's crew, though battered and tired, fought with everything they had. Maya and Tessa worked feverishly at their stations, firing weapons and shielding their ship from incoming fire. Direct hit to the starboard side. Maya cried out, "Shields are at 60%. We can't take much more of this." Ethan's mind raced. They couldn't keep this up forever. The Aegis was strong, but it wasn't invincible. The Krivian flagship was an enemy unlike anything they had ever faced. If they didn't do something drastic, they would be wiped out. The Aegis lurched again, this time from a blast that rocked the entire ship. Ethan stumbled, grabbing hold of the nearest console to steady himself. Maya's face was pale, but her hands moved quickly, trying to keep the ship operational. There was no time to waste. "Ethan, we need to move now." Maya's voice was filled with urgency. "The flagship is ready to launch its final weapon. We're running out of time." Ethan's heart skipped a beat. The Krivians had a weapon even more destructive than anything they had seen so far. If they launched it, the human fleet wouldn't stand a chance. "Do whatever it takes to disable that weapon," Ethan ordered. "We need a clear shot." Maya nodded. Her fingers flew across the controls, sending all of the ship's power to the weapon systems. The Aegis was a ship of legends, and it was about to earn its place in history. Meanwhile, on Viridian, David and his soldiers were locked in their own desperate struggle. The ground was shaking beneath their feet as explosions lit up the night sky. The alien forces were relentless, pushing forward with overwhelming strength, but David refused to back down. "Hold your ground," he yelled to his team. "This is our planet. This is our home. We don't give up." The soldiers, though exhausted, gripped their weapons tightly and fought back with everything they had. They knew that every step they took, every inch of ground they held, bought the fleet more time. If the human fleet couldn't win in space, Viridian would fall, and humanity would be finished. But David's people were not ready to give up. They had come too far, fought too hard. Just as the enemy's forces breached the outer defense line, a sudden tremor shook the ground. It wasn't the blast from an alien weapon. It was something different. It was the Aegis. "Captain, the Aegis has taken action," one of David's soldiers called out, eyes wide with disbelief. "They're charging the flagship." David's eyes widened in realization. They're going to destroy it. They're going to make a move no one thought possible. Up in the void of space, the Aegis had nearly reached the Krivian flagship. Ethan's heart raced as he saw the ship's powerful cannons charge one final time. This was it. If they didn't land a critical blow now, the Aegis would be lost. "Focus all power on that flagship," Ethan yelled. "Now or never." Maya's hands flew over the console. The Aegis fired a massive shot directly at the Krivian flagship, and for a moment, everything seemed to stop. The blast hit, and there was a bright flash, followed by an eerie silence. Then the flagship shuddered violently. Its shields were gone, and its hull was breached. The Krivians were caught off guard. It wasn't over yet, but humanity had just turned the tide. The flagship's engines sputtered as it drifted helplessly in space, its weapons offline. "We've done it," Maya shouted, her voice filled with disbelief and joy. "We've disabled their flagship." But the battle wasn't over. The Krivian fleet still outnumbered the humans, and their forces weren't about to surrender. But the humans had won a major victory. The flagship was their key to victory, and now the Krivians were vulnerable. Ethan turned to Maya with a determined look. "We finished this. For humanity." On Viridian, David and his team were watching the skies as the explosions in space slowly began to die down. They saw the enemy fleet retreating, and the ground tremors lessened. It wasn't over yet, but the worst had passed. David's unit had held the line, and the battle in space had turned in humanity's favor. "We've won," one of David's soldiers said, a breath of relief escaping his lips. David nodded, but his eyes remained focused on the sky. "This is just the beginning. The galaxy will remember what humanity did here. We've become legends, and we will fight to ensure this is just the start of our story." The human fleet, battered but not broken, stood victorious. The Krivians had underestimated them, and now they would never make that mistake again. Humanity had proven that they were no longer just a rising power. They were a force to be reckoned with. As the Aegis slowly pulled away from the damaged flagship, Ethan felt the weight of their victory. The legend of humanity had been forged in the heat of battle. And now, the galaxy would never forget the strength, determination, and courage of the human race.